Hello, BookTube. Hello, friends. Welcome to Lizziefaye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth. Today is Saturday, April the 12th, and it is Gladys Taber's birthday. Gladys Taber week is quickly coming to a close. Tonight, we have a live stream here on my channel where as many of our Gladys Taber book club as possible will be here chatting about the week, chatting about Gladys Taber, her books, and the fun that we have had this week bringing these videos to you. I hope that you have enjoyed them. I hope that now the name Gladys Taber will be on your radar and that you will be able to find some Gladys Taber books of your own and read them and love them as much as we have. So you may be thinking, okay, we've heard quotes from Gladys Taber. Several people have shown their collections. Even Sonia has prepared a recipe from a Gladys Taber cookbook. What more could you possibly talk about? We know about Gladys Taber already. Well, I am going to tell you that there is one more thing I want to share with you this week, and that is Gladys Taber's love of reading. We are booktubers, and we have bookish friends, and we love to read, and we love to talk about books. And not only was Gladys a writer and author, she loved to read. She was friends with many wonderful authors, and she talked about a lot of books and authors in her own books. I had not really given it a lot of thought. I had noticed that Gladys was always talking about different authors, but one day Sonia messaged me that she was reading a passage from the Still Meadow Sampler, and she came across a passage where Gladys was talking about Hal Borland and his wife and how she was friends with them. And so she looked up Hal Borland and saw that there was an audiobook for one of his books on Hoopla, and she listened to it and she loved it. And she messaged me about it. She said, "This is so great." And I started thinking, yeah, Gladys talks about a lot of authors. So I started notating what authors she was talking about and what names kept popping up. And I just got interested in reading like Gladys Taber. So I will have to admit, I got this idea because of Sonia initially reading a Hal Borland book. And it's interesting that Lindsey from Lindsey Reads talked about how she discovered Gladys Taber through Hal Borland. And he is one of the authors that I'm going to talk about today that you can find books by him the easiest. And that's wonderful because I have listened to a couple of his books now and sampled a few more, and so far I have loved everything that I have read or listened to by Hal Borland as well. So anyway, before I get started into talking about various authors and things, I wanted to just read a couple more quotes from a couple of the Still Meadow books that I saved for today's video, where Gladys is just talking about her philosophy of reading. So the first segment that I want to read is from pages 174 and 175 of Still Meadow Seasons. It's in chapter 8, which is the November chapter. And I've mentioned before, I think, that Still Meadow Seasons just has numbered chapters, but each of them still goes along with each month. There are 12 chapters. Chapter 8 is November. And she's cooking and reading a copy of the Saturday Review of Literature. I'm sure that Steve Donahue has some knowledge of that. I don't personally, but so she's cooking and she's reading from a writer that she refers to as Mr. Hackett. And here's a point where Gladys and I definitely agree. She says, "While I make the gravy, I agree with Mr. Hackett that no book is great for the tragedy of events, but that the people must be important to whom the event happens. In other words, we have to care about the characters." I completely agree. "A good many modern-day books fail because the characters are so trivial, so degenerate, or so futile that it just can't matter to us whether they live or die in those slick book jackets." I agree. I am very much a character-driven reader, and sometimes it doesn't matter to me if there's not a big plot as long as I love the characters. So Gladys and I agree on that point. I had another quote that I thought I had marked, and then when I went back, I couldn't find it. But basically, Gladys is saying that she loves to go to bed early and not to sleep, but to read. She talks about how there's just nothing better than snuggling up in her bed with a great book. And while I actually have a hard time staying awake long enough to read. Once I'm down, I'm out. But I get it. I get that it is a wonderful, luxurious thing to curl up with a good book. So when I first started reading Gladys Taber books, I didn't think to, from the get-go, write down a list of authors that she mentions. If I were to go back and reread any of these books, I would definitely make a more comprehensive list of authors. But there are some that continue to pop up, and there are some that I just kind of had in the back of my head. And as I would see or find books while I was out and about, like at our liquidation store where I worked back in November, December, one author in particular, I remembered seeing one of his books on the shelf, and I thought, I think Gladys talked about him. I don't know that she was friends with him, but I think she talked about him. And then I came back and I was reading, and there she mentioned him again. And I said, okay, I'm going to get that book. So, just as life goes on, I have some of these authors in the back of my head. And now that I am conscious of it, I am going to be consciously looking for some of these authors now that I have tried some of their books, and I wanted to share them with you because reading Gladys Taber has been a wonderful experience in and of itself, but it has opened my mind up and my reading life up to a whole new list of authors that I didn't even know about. So I was curious to know if any of my in real life friends and bookish friends had heard of or read any of these authors that I'm going to talk about today. So since my book club was this week on Thursday, my mystery book club, I took a little poll. I wrote down a list of the authors that I'm going to talk about today, and I went through each one and I asked them first if they had heard of this author, and then I asked them if they had read any books by this author. And as I go through each author, I will share with you, there were only 6 other people at my book club yesterday. We had a few people that were out, and not as many people come for the mystery club as will be at our book club next week, which is our general everyday book club. But it was still a very interesting little poll that I took. Okay, so now let's move on to the authors that Gladys Taber read. We've already mentioned Hal Borland, and if you watch Lindsey's video, Lindsey Reads, you will learn a lot more about Hal Borland there. She talks about how she likes to read nature writing, and that's how she found Hal Borland, and then she discovered Gladys Taber through Hal Borland. And I just think that is such a neat story to hear how each of us have come to our knowledge of Gladys, and how, one book gets us to another book, and one author gets us to another author, and I think that's awesome. I didn't learn about Hal Borland until Sonia mentioned him, and then right after that, I got to that part in Still Meadow Sampler, and I read the section about Hal Borland, and I think at that point I looked him up on Hoopla, and I saw that there were several books on Hoopla. In fact, there are 7 audiobooks and 5 ebooks. And on Everand, you can get all 7 on ebook even. You can get all 7 audiobooks and all 7 ebooks. Now my library does not have any of the Hal Borland books in physical form that are available on Hoopla or Everand, but they did have one book that was quite unexpected, and I have it checked out. I'm going to show it to you in a minute. But let me just share with you what I have read so far by Hal Borland, and I hope that you will pick some up. The book that Sonia read is called This Hill, This Valley, and I have started that one, but I have not finished it yet. I looked up the publication order of Hal Borland's books just because I wanted to kind of see where I should start. And the one I ended up starting with was a memoir about his boyhood set in the early 1900s, and it's called High, Wide, and Lonesome. It was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. And as I was listening to it, I thought, this is kind of like a Little House on the Prairie from a boy's perspective. Not quite as far back in time, because when Laura Ingalls was that age, it was still the 1800s, but not far into the future from that time, and it just had that feel. Now, I will say, though, there were some tough things that he did experience. There was some animal cruelty that he witnessed that he does talk about in that book that was really, really tough. And he did not like it himself. He ran away from it. But he does talk about it. So just know going into that, if you read or listen to that book, that there is going to be that aspect of it. But I thought the book was just fantastic. Now, I went from there to a fiction book, which I believe that many people have read in school, and it's called When the Legends Die. This is a book about a young Native American boy who was basically pulled from his roots. His parents had both died, and he was living on his own up in the mountains on a reservation, and the white people of the time had the arrogance to think that they knew better for him and, pulled him from everything he knew and just, took over his life. And, I know that happened. And we were just talking about that at my book club on Thursday. And it's just really terrible how Native Americans were treated in that respect. But this book was so well done. I loved it. I thought it was great. I rated it 5 stars. I wish that I had read it in school. It is the only book that I own by Hal Borland that I have a physical copy of, but I've mislaid it. Well, of course, when I'm getting ready for this video, I could not find where I put it. I did listen to it on audio on Hoopla, and I loved it. And it is definitely one that I would recommend. I did find my physical copy at our liquidation store. I found more than one copy, actually. So I would think that because it's a book that people have read in school, that is a book that you might have an easier time finding than some of the others. From there, I went to Starting This Hill, This Valley, but because I was running out of time and I needed to get this video filmed, I thought, after a few chapters into that, I'm just going to go ahead and dip into a couple of others just to see what they're about so that I can tell you. So the next one I tried was The Dog Who Came to Stay. Now, this is also a memoir about his adulthood, when a couple of dogs, stray dogs, showed up at the home of him and his wife. They ended up, rescuing them, basically. I kind of wondered, I thought, okay, there's 2 dogs, and the title only says The Dog Who Came to Stay. I wonder what happens to the other dog. So I read in the description that they end up giving one of the dogs to a young neighbor who had lost his dog. And they end up just keeping one of the dogs, which then becomes a treasured family pet. And so I didn't get very far into that because, again, I wanted to prepare for this video. So next I tried Country Editor's Boy. That's the one I'm going to finish next because Country Editor's Boy is the sequel to High, Wide, and Lonesome. It picks up where High, Wide, and Lonesome leaves off when Hal Borland is a teenager. His father has decided to go back into journalism. He had tried farming for a while. They did homestead a place in Colorado, and he farmed it long enough to get the land. And then he decided that he was really more cut out to be a newspaper man. So that is what he did. And Hal Borland then became his apprentice and learned the trade of being a journalist and a printer. So I have listened to a few chapters of that, and that is wonderful. I'm very much enjoying it. There are a couple of others by Hal Borland that I wasn't able to check out yet, but they are available. As I said, there are 7 books total on the Hoopla app and on Everand. So this is where I would start. If you want to dip into Hal Borland, I would probably start with When the Legends Die. It's a fiction book. He did write some other fiction, but I think he mostly wrote nonfiction. And since that one is probably the most well-known, and it's heartbreaking, but it's great, I would start there. Then to get into his memoirs, I would start with High, Wide, and Lonesome. That is the story of his boyhood. From there, go into Country Editor's Boy. And then you could go on to probably This Hill, This Valley, and The Dog Who Came to Stay. Then after The Dog Who Came to Stay, he's got another memoir about a dog called Penny, the story of a free soul basset hound. And it looks like Penny came out after The Dog Who Came to Stay. So if you're going chronologically, then Penny would be next. He also has another book that I think would fall under the category of nature writing, and it's called Beyond Your Doorstep, Handbook of the Country. And in the description, it says that he is writing on the virtues of embracing the great outdoors, which sounds wonderful. Now, I thought it was interesting that the title of this was Beyond Your Doorstep, because one phrase I've heard him say, or one thing I've heard him say in a couple of the books now, he describes the area outside your door as your dooryard. Not your front yard or your backyard, but your dooryard. And that just sounds so comforting to me. I think that's what I had at home, but we didn't really call it that. But I love that terminology. I love that term, dooryard. When I was growing up, we had a front yard. We had what you would probably call the dooryard. And then because our house was set a pretty good ways off the road, we had a larger expanse that was loosely fenced in where, a horse could graze or, calves could graze or whatever, but that was still technically our front yard. But the closer part to the house, you had to drive down between the two pastures sort of to get to our actual front yard, which I'm going to think of now as our dooryard. And then, of course, out back, we had our backyard, but then there were outbuildings and barns and things like that. So the area right around the house would be the dooryard. And I love that. I wish that we had called it that when I was growing up. Anyway, so that is basically the Hal Borland books that you will be able to find readily. All of those 7 audiobooks are available on Audible. None of them are on the Audible Plus package, though. Each of them will cost you a credit, but all of them are full-length books, except for the book about Penny. It's only maybe 4.5 to 5 hours, something like that. All of the others are at least 8 or more hours, and I think would be well worth a credit if you don't have access to Hoopla or Everand or something like that. Now, one other Hal Borland book that I was able to find at my library, surprisingly, is Plants of Christmas. This was written by Hal Borland and illustrated by Anne Ophelia Dowden. And let me tell you, the paintings in here are stunning. Absolutely stunning. And it is very interesting. Each of these plants are associated with Christmas, but Hal Borland has researched and discovered the origins of these plants. Many of them were originally from other druids or pagan rituals and things like that, and they've just come to be associated with this season. One thing I did read that I disagree with, and I don't know if he's just repeating the legend or if he actually thought this, and I believe I'm right on this one. He's talking about the Norway spruce. And he says, one legend says the fir was the original tree of life in Eden and had big leaves and blossoms until Eve ate of its fruit. In punishment, its leaves were shrunken to needles, its fruit to cones. Another legend says it bloomed again the night of the Nativity and thus became the first Christmas tree. Okay, now let's go back to where it says, and he's just repeating the legend. So I don't know if he doesn't realize, though, that the tree of life is not the tree that Eve ate from. She ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And I was always taught that the reason that God then had to drive Adam and Eve out of the garden was so that they wouldn't then turn around and eat of the tree of life and live forever in their sins. Because had they eaten of the tree of life, they would have had immortality. That's just what I've always learned. So there were 2 famous trees in the garden. Now, God did not originally tell Adam and Eve they couldn't eat of the tree of life. He said, don't eat of the tree of good and evil. So once they did what they weren't supposed to do, then he had to stop them from eating of the tree of life. That's what I believe. So anyway, I just noticed that in this little bit here. But going forward, the illustrations are beautiful, and the narrative about each plant is very interesting. There are 12 different plants in all, and they are right here if you are interested in finding this book. It's very little. It's like the size of a child's book. I read it easily, quickly in one sitting, and I very much enjoyed it. Interestingly enough, of my book club, when I asked them who has heard of Hal Borland, only one person said they thought they had heard of him, and nobody thought that they had read any books by him. Now, keep in mind, my book club is an older demographic. I'm the youngest one that was there, and there are a couple of others that sometimes come that are younger than me, but they weren't there on that day. I think the next person up from me in age is 64, and there wasn't anybody there today that was over 75. So, basically 64 to 75 years, which is still a reasonable age for people to possibly have heard of or read some of these books. But they might have forgotten that they had ever heard of some of these authors or read them. I know I have a hard time remembering everything that I've read. If it weren't for Goodreads, I wouldn't remember. Okay, but I didn't start with Hal Borland in my little poll that I took with my book club. I started with Keats. I first just said John Keats, and then I said Keats, the poet, and they're like, "Oh, yeah." Everybody had heard of Keats, and I said, "Well, who has read Keats?" And 3 of the 6 raised their hand, and I think a couple of the others were like, "I don't know, maybe in school. I don't know." I am not a poetry reader by any means. I don't really understand a lot of poetry. I do not even really read a lot of classics. If you ask me to do that 1,000 books you should read before you die, like Sandy is doing, I'll put her channel down below. I couldn't do it because I've looked through some of those books, and really about the only ones of those books that I am remotely interested in are the children's classics. But because Gladys very frequently mentions Keats, I thought, okay, I'm going to give Keats a try. Keats was really the first author that I even looked into when I started thinking about reading like Gladys Taber. And I remember just being kind of proud of myself because I picked up my Kindle one day and I did a search for ebooks because I think I looked at my library. I don't know if there were any physical books with his poetry, any volumes. So I found on ebook for $1 100 Poems by John Keats. And I have been reading that, chinking away at that for a couple of months now. I am right in the middle right now of a very long poem called Endymion. Some of you may be familiar with that. I just finished reading part 2 last night. It is very long. It's a good portion of the book, just that alone. Keats sadly only lived to be, I think, 25 or 26 years old. I looked up Keats yesterday online because I wanted to just do a little bit more research about him, and also because I wanted to try and find out what episode of The Waltons he was quoted in. My husband and I have been watching The Waltons. We're in the middle of season 2 right now. And I remember either from early in season 2 or late in season 1 that either Grandpa or John Boy quoted Keats just out of the blue, and the other one finished it. And I thought, wow, I think it was Grandpa that started it and John Boy recognized it as Keats. And I thought, my goodness, was it that common to just know a line from Keats right off the bat? I mean, would Grandpa Walton have known that? And I looked it up, and it said that there were a couple of his poems that were very widely studied and analyzed. And I thought, well, maybe it was one of those. One of them it mentioned was Ode to a Nightingale. And I looked, and it's in my collection of poetry by John Keats that I have on my Kindle. And I read it, and I thought, I was trying to think if maybe this was what they had quoted, but it didn't ring any bells. I don't know. But when I Googled what episode of The Waltons was Keats quoted, it named an episode in season 4, which we haven't gotten to yet. So I'll be looking forward to that. I'll be listening for it, and I'm gonna have to go back and watch and try to find again what poem was quoted. Anyway, it was just interesting because I'm not a poetry reader. I'm not a memorizer of poetry, but some people are. That is what they enjoy doing, and anyway, I have been reading Keats, and I'll have to tell you, I don't understand a lot of it. He mentions a lot of Greek gods. I think he's referred to as one of the romantics. His poetry is very flowery and romantic, but a lot of it goes over my head. And I don't really know what I'm reading, but Gladys loved Keats and I love Gladys, so I'm reading some Keats. Now, another author that I asked my book club if they recognized was Ted Key. Everybody shook their head. Nobody knew who Ted Key was. And I said, who has watched the old TV show Hazel? Everybody raised their hand. And I said, Ted Key drew Hazel. And they're like, oh, yeah, I've read Ted Key. So I did not know about Hazel. Hazel was before my time, but there are some clips and I think some full episodes of the show Hazel on YouTube. But Hazel originated as a newspaper cartoon. She's a maid for a family, and Gladys Taber knew Ted Key. And she kind of jokes in her books that her and Hazel had a pen pal relationship. She said she would write to Hazel and Hazel would write back. And, they would make some joke about, keeping Ted Key in line, like as if she was Ted Key's housekeeper. And it's delightful. I absolutely love that. There's nothing about Ted Key that I could find online in any form other than the Hazel episodes. So I had to purchase this on eBay. And there are quite a few different Hazel books, compilations of Hazel cartoons on eBay. And this one was just the least expensive one because I wanted to grab one and read it before this video. And I will tell you, I did not understand all of the humor in this. I didn't understand all of the captions and all of the cartoons. But I understood enough to know that it was definitely humorous. It was definitely fun. And I'm so glad that I got this book. I will definitely be on the hunt for more. I will definitely be watching some of the old Hazel TV shows. It was kind of like Leave It to Beaver, kind of that era, and it was adorable. So if you ever have a chance to watch Hazel or find some Hazel cartoons, I hope that you will. Now, the next author I want to talk about, I don't know if he was a friend of Gladys's or if she just read him. But this is an author that I noticed in the liquidation store where I was working last November and December. And I saw this book and I thought, I saw this book spine. It kind of caught my eye. And I looked at it and I thought, I think this is something Gladys would read. I didn't pick it up right away. I came back. I was still reading a Gladys book at the time. And finally, there was a mention of James Thurber. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna get this book. I don't know if this is one in particular that she read. This one is kind of a treasury of some of James Thurber's work. But when I asked my book club who has heard of James Thurber, everybody raised their hand. And then I asked who has read James Thurber, and at least half raised their hand that they had read James Thurber. So I picked this up. Now this, like I said, is a treasury of a lot of his work. He was a cartoonist as well as a humorist writer, and I have dipped into this a little bit, but at the liquidation store, I also found this book, and this is the one I've been reading. It was a little more doable, so it's divided into 3 parts. It's divided into a section called Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, and that is about a couple who are... just ridiculous. But I would describe them as sort of, he's kind of a bumbling, he's kind of a stereotypical bumbling husband, and his wife is sort of no nonsense, gives him instructions, and then leaves the house, and then he has no memory of what she told him to do. That's kind of it in a nutshell. They're just ridiculous. But I did enjoy their chapters. I just finished their chapters today. The section is just called Mr. and Mrs. Monroe. Then there is a section of cartoons that are written like as if they were from a periodical, and they're called the Pet Department. They're ridiculous little tidbits of like as if someone was writing to a newspaper or a periodical asking questions about a pet, and they're ridiculous. So that is in here. Now that section, the Pet Department, is in this book. Then I just noticed today that the 3rd section is a section that I am going to love because it is about words and usage of words and pronunciations and things like that. I love reading and fussing about grammar and mispronunciations and things like that. It has several chapters on different words like who and whom. That's chapter 1. There's one chapter called Split Infinitive, which actually I don't know what that is, but I'm going to enjoy reading about it. The part 3 of this book is called Ladies and Gentlemen's Guide to Modern English Usage. So I'm going to eat that up. That's going to be great. Anyway, James Thurber is well known for a short story that was made into 2 or maybe 3 different movies, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Now, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty is a 5-page short story. It's in this book. Now, what's in here may be abridged. I don't know. But my husband and I just watched this. I got this from the library on Thursday, and we watched it that night. It was fun. Now, I asked him, I was like, have you ever seen this? And he said, no. And I said, well, I've been reading a little bit of James Thurber, and he seems to be a humorist. So I'm going to guess that since Ben Stiller is the star and James Thurber is the author, that it's going to be humorous. And it was fun. There was a lot more to it than that. But we enjoyed it. It was kind of out there, but we did enjoy it. Now, I went back today and read the story in here, and it's kind of 2 separate things, but as somebody wrote in their review, the essence of the character is here. So Walter Mitty is basically a man who daydreams of a more exciting life. So in this movie, his life and his job situation is completely different than what it is in the story. But in the story, it's the same thing. He's dreaming, he stops and daydreams of a more exciting life. So it's just that the situations are different. I'm curious now to watch the earlier version or versions of the movie because I wonder if it's a totally different situation. So anyway, this was very enjoyable. And as I was looking up James Thurber, though, I thought, I know I've heard of James Thurber before. It's because he wrote a Caldecott winner. Now, interestingly enough, he was an artist, but he did not do the illustrations for this book. So I don't understand that. Anyway, I went back, though, and I reread this today, and my daughter and I are doing a series where we're reading all the Caldecott winners, and I've been doing videos about each decade. So I went back and read this, and it is a neat story, and I can see some of the James Thurber humor coming out in it. But I didn't really think that the illustrations were necessarily Caldecott quality, but they're unique. They're good, but maybe not necessarily what I would have chosen, but I don't know. I want to read you just one bit that I thought was pretty funny, and this is an example of the James Thurber humor. In this story, there's a little princess who wants her father to bring her the moon, and so he consults his Lord High Chamberlain, he consults his royal magician, he consults his royal wizard, and of course none of them can do it. The court jester is the one who can do it. But when he calls each of these royal people to come and see what they can do, they all remind him of what they have already done for him. And, they're like, I've done all these things for you, but I can't give you the moon. And they list all these things off. So it's the royal wizard who says, he's already listed a bunch of things, but then he says, I have given you 7 league boots, the golden touch, and a cloak of invisibility. It didn't work, said the king. The cloak of invisibility didn't work. Yes, it did, said the royal wizard. No, it didn't, said the king. I kept bumping into things, the same as ever. The cloak is supposed to make you invisible, said the royal wizard. It's not supposed to keep you from bumping into things. All I know is I kept bumping into things, said the king. The royal wizard looked at his list again. It goes on, but I just thought that was cute. A lot of fun. So James Thurber has a very interesting sense of humor. And apparently Gladys read some James Thurber, and now I'm reading some James Thurber, and I'm being very entertained by it. All right, so the last one I want to talk about is Faith Baldwin. Now, Faith Baldwin is mentioned a lot by Gladys. I think that they were very good friends. They were the best of bookish friends because Faith was also a writer and probably a reader. And she wrote a lot of books, and many of hers, I think most of hers, are out of print as well, much like Gladys. And her and Gladys had a relationship almost like I have with booktubers. But they were close enough in proximity that they could visit each other. Gladys talks about quite often about Faith visiting her home. And there is one segment that I want to read. All right, so this is right in the beginning of the winter section. I won't read all of it. I'll skip over a few parts, but she says, Faith Baldwin usually comes to visit in the lull between storms. She lives about an hour and a quarter away in an old house, though younger than ours. It is no longer farming country there, but she has meadows and woods and a shallow pond big enough for ducks. A friend drives her up. For getting from her house to ours by train would puzzle the president of the railroad. Besides, she brings baskets of things, too many to lug on a train if there were a train. She comes in well-wrapped, mittened, and with fur boots, and a basket on each arm. More baskets follow. She unpacks the treasures. I'm going to skip a little bit, and then she says, the second basket is books. It was Faith, of course, who had a book finder find the out-of-print A.C. Mayo trio and 2 other very rare Phoebe Atwood Taylor mysteries. For me, she located the book by Ellsworth Thane about her finch, Chiwi. Now, Ellsworth Thane was an author that my mother read, and I should have read some Ellsworth Thane. That is one of the most charming books I have. Ellsworth herself couldn't find a copy for me, so she must have known Ellsworth Thane also. And she always adds a few books, such as Henry Beston's Outermost House or Kathleen Doss Passo's delightful book about Cape Cod. She says, the third basket, by now we are dizzy. And she goes on talking about the third basket. So Faith Baldwin was a very dear friend of hers and a very prolific author in her own right. And when I asked my book club who had heard of Faith Baldwin, 4 hands went up, which I was excited about because our library does not have anything in its catalog by Faith Baldwin. No ebooks, no audiobooks, no physical books, nothing. But 4 people had heard of her, and 1 person had read her. She was pretty sure she had. She said, I can't remember what, but I'm pretty sure I have. So I was excited to see that. Now, I have 2 books currently by Faith Baldwin, and I'm, of course, on the hunt for more. I just finished reading one today. One of them I've actually had for a couple of years, and I found it at a library sale up in Gainesville, Florida. And when I found it, I thought, this looks like something. And I looked up the author. Of course, this is way before I even knew about Gladys Taber. I looked up the author, and I saw that there were books by her that were selling. And even though this is just a little mass market paperback, I thought, yeah, it's worth giving it a shot. So I bought this book. I think it was 50 cents. I put it in my eBay store, not for a lot. And, it sat there. So then, fast forward, I start reading Gladys Taber, and she's talking about Faith Baldwin, and I think, I'm pretty sure I have a Faith Baldwin book in my eBay store. Well, I didn't do anything about it. I just let it sit for a little while. And then, fast forward to our liquidation store, and I'm shopping there one day, and I see this. You Can't Escape, Faith Baldwin. And I thought, Faith Baldwin, that's Gladys Taber's friend. And so I immediately grabbed it. And then when I got home, I thought, okay, I need to go dig out that Faith Baldwin book that I have in my eBay store. I didn't actually dig it out at the time, but I did go find it, in my listings, and I unlisted it so that it wouldn't sell because I knew that I wanted to read it. And I wanted to talk to you about it. I wanted to show it to you. And I thought the last thing I need is for it to get sold out from under me. So I finally did this week go and actually dig it out of the boxes where it was stored with other listed books. So I just read a chapter of this one today. I don't think that I'm going to enjoy this one quite as much as I did this one. This one I think is going to be about a girl who it's kind of a coming of age story. And I believe that she's going to make some poor life choices. And I don't enjoy reading about young people who make poor life choices. I would much rather that they avoid that, learn from others' mistakes, and avoid that. And that's kind of what happened in this book. This was delightful. I really enjoyed it. This book was originally published in 1931, and this edition, along with I think 25 other books that are listed here by Faith Baldwin, were republished in the 70s by the Warner Paperback Library line. And so this book was originally published in 1943, and then this edition in 1947. But look at the green edges and the brown pages. I mean, even though the pages have darkened with age, the book itself is very tight, very solid. It is very well put together, considering that it was published, right after World War II. It was very good. I did mark one passage that cracked me up. Now, let me just tell you what this book is about. I'm not going to tell you much, and I will tell you, now, if you go on Goodreads to mark this on your to-read list, don't read the description. Thankfully, I say that. I had read chapter 1 completely blind, and I kind of could tell where the end result would be. That part is predictable, but the story to get there, I would not have known if I hadn't read the description. And I wish I hadn't, because it kind of ruined a lot of the story for me. I think that I would not have predicted how the story would play out if I had not read the description. And there were still some surprises, but the first few developments in the story, I wish that I would not have known about. And maybe if I had read the description before I ever picked the book up, it wouldn't have stuck with me. But I had already read the first chapter, and then I saw the description, and I was like, oh, well, that's what's going to happen next. So it bothers me when that happens. But anyway, let me just say, it's a story. It's more of like a new adult story. It's about people who are out of high school. They're in their early 20s, but it's the 1940s. So, they have to grow up fast. This was written before America got into the war. So there is talk from the young men that they are, thinking about signing up and joining in. But at this point, they are working in jobs. They're working in offices. The women still are not thinking much about working, after they get married, things like that. But it is the story of young love, of betrayal, of, misbehavior, coming of age. There's, finding careers, finding love. There's just a lot of back and forth. There is some deceit. There's, like I said, there's deceit and betrayal. Anyway, I really enjoyed this, but there's this one part where the main female is kind of being courted by this other young man who, you already know she's not going to end up with him, but he's a nice enough fellow, and she is willing to spend some time with him, and he takes her out to dinner, but she never really promises him anything. And they have both just come from like a house party. Now, these are people, they know people who live in the Hamptons, some, very well-off people, and they're, I think, coming from a house party and, at one of those homes. And he is, just kind of asking her again, because he kind of jokes around with her, that, he would like to actually date her, and, he's interested in her. So they're talking about this young lady who I think was the hostess of this party. And he's talking about how, she's attractive and everyone, flocks to her, but there's really nothing in her head. He says, there's really not much to her. And so Linda, who's our main character, she says, golly, how hard she must have turned you down. And he says, well, you little brat, he said, exasperated. That's no way to win a man, by telling him the truth. I don't want to win you, she said, not even in a raffle. I love that. I don't want to win you, not even in a raffle. He was not offended because they joked back and forth. He says, smart girl, York sighed. No, Linda, Nelda was a temporary aberration. She's in love with two things irrevocably. Herself, for one, and her attraction for men. So, anyway, this book is I found to be very delightful, and now that I have Faith Baldwin on my radar, I am definitely going to be looking for more Faith Baldwin books. So that is my look at not only authors that Gladys Taber read, but many of which she was friends with. And this has just opened up such a wonderful world of new to me authors and new to me books to read and authors to explore. And I hope that you will have found something in this video that might interest you, and that if you are a fan of Gladys Taber, you will also find some joy in reading some of the authors that she knew and loved. So that's all for this video. I hope that you will join us this evening for our live stream. It'll be here on my channel. Now, if you're seeing this after the fact, please know that I have a playlist of all of these videos, and I will include the live stream in that playlist so that you can go back and watch everyone. We have had some fantastic contributions from quite a few booktubers. We even had an unexpected video from Mark from the channel Richardson Reads. I also discovered a couple of other YouTubers that I didn't know about. Amy from Hearthridge also has a video where she recommends some Gladys Taber books. I will link that video in the description. In the description of my first video, I also mentioned a couple of other channels who have read and are reading Gladys Taber that didn't have a chance to do a video this week. Gina Stanyer is a fan of Gladys Taber, and hopefully we will hear more about her Gladys Taber collection in the future. Also, Angie from Angie and the Great World. I asked her if she had ever heard of Gladys Taber when I first started reading one, and she at the time said, no, but I have some. I just hadn't started them because I don't have book one. And I said, you don't have to read book one. So since then, and I saw on Goodreads that she was currently reading one, and so I messaged her on Instagram and asked her how she was enjoying it. She said, I love it. So I hope that we will hear more from her in the future regarding Gladys Taber. Anyway, though, please come back for our live stream if you catch this video in time and you are able to catch it live. I hope that you will join us in the chat, and please go back and watch any of the videos you have missed. Check out the playlist so you don't miss any videos. Each person has a different story to tell about how they found Gladys Taber, what books they have read, and what they are reading, and what they have in their collection, and it has just been a fantastic week. Also today, I believe you will get another video from Steve Donahue. Beginning of the week, he did not know when he would be able to post a video, but Steve first posted a video on Monday, I believe, and another one on Friday. And he said on Friday that he planned to do at least one and maybe two more on Saturday. So please be sure and check those out. And then of course, we had a video from Lindsey from Lindsey Reads, Mitzi from Mitzi Reads and Writes, and Jen from Jen's Reading Life, and two videos from Sonia with an I. One was a cooking video that was awesome, and of course her Monday video was mainly about her collection. So it's been a fantastic week. Please check out all the videos if you have not yet. They are wonderful. I have watched most of them twice and sometimes 3 times, and I will probably go back and watch them again. And as BookTube events go, I feel like this one was kind of unique. It's not a readathon. Now, we want to encourage you to read Gladys Taber, but because Gladys Taber books are so hard to find, we knew that we couldn't really come on here and say, okay, everybody get a Gladys Taber book and read it. But we want you to get a Gladys Taber book and read it. We just know it might take some time. And as Steve Donahue mentioned a couple of times, one of the benefits of this Gladys Taber week is just to get her name out there. Put her on your radar so that when you are out book shopping at used bookstores and library sales and things like that, you might run across a Gladys Taber book and grab it. If it is affordable at all, grab it. And I'm hoping now, after seeing this video, that you might put some of these other authors on your radar as well. They are for sure on mine. Anyway, I've gone on long enough. I just hope that you have enjoyed this week and that you will come back for more videos from me and from all of these other wonderful booktubers. And for now, though, that's all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day, read a good book, and God bless you.